You know what's really messed up? When you think you've moved past something and built a whole life together, only to find out your husband has been keeping score for 16 years straight. I'm Veronica. I'm 38 now, and I just lived through what I can only describe as the most calculated takedown I've ever witnessed. And the crazy part? Everyone thinks he's the hero in this story. Liam and I got married young. I was 22, he was 24. We were both complete disasters back then, coming from families that would make Jerry Springer episodes look wholesome. His dad was a violent drunk, his mom was strung out on pills half the time, and my family wasn't much better with the emotional abuse and neglect. The difference was I learned to adapt and survive, while Liam spent years in therapy programs acting like he was on some spiritual journey to enlightenment. Don't get me wrong, good for him for getting clean and working on his issues. But he never let anyone forget that he was the one doing the work, while the rest of us were just winging it through life. He went to AA meetings religiously, did individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, you name it. Liam was there with his little notebook taking notes like he was studying for the world's most important exam. Meanwhile, I'm working full-time, trying to keep us afloat financially while he's off finding himself. We had this whole plan mapped out like we were running a corporation. Kids would start at the 5-year mark, house would be paid off by year 10, retirement savings would begin at year 12. Everything was scheduled and organized because Liam needed structure to feel secure. In our 4th year of marriage, things got complicated. We had this mutual friend, Austin, who was around a lot because Liam was sponsoring him through his own recovery process. Austin and I started talking more when Liam was at his various meetings and appointments. At first, it was just friendship, someone to vent to about how isolated I felt in my own marriage. Liam was so focused on his personal growth journey that he kind of forgot he had a wife who needed attention too. I'd try to talk to him about feeling disconnected, and he'd suggest I get my own therapist or maybe join Al-Anon since I was affected by addiction through him. Everything was a program or a process with him. There was no room for just being human and messy sometimes. The thing with Austin escalated gradually. We'd text throughout the day, meet for coffee when Liam was busy, and eventually it became physical. I'm not proud of it, but when you're feeling invisible in your own marriage, sometimes you make choices that aren't smart. Then there was also this situation with a guy from my work around the same time. Looking back, I was clearly acting out because I felt so neglected at home. When Liam found out about Austin, it was like watching someone transform into a completely different person. He didn't just confront me, he had evidence. Printouts of text messages, photos of us together, a whole timeline of when and where everything happened. I found out later he'd been suspicious for weeks and had basically turned into a private investigator. Of course, I denied it initially. Who wouldn't, when your husband ambush you with what looks like a FBI case file? But when someone has screenshots of your conversations and knows exactly where you were on specific dates, there's not much room to maneuver. When I finally broke down and admitted everything, you'd think he might acknowledge that our marriage had some problems that contributed to the situation. But no. According to Liam, I was just a cheating wife who'd betrayed his trust, and he was the innocent victim who'd been stabbed in the back by his best friend and his wife. There was no discussion about why I might have been vulnerable to Austin's attention, no examination of how Liam's emotional absence might have played a role. Just me being evil and him being wronged. He made me go through this humiliating process of confessing every detail, creating written timelines, answering the same questions over and over in couples therapy. I had to cut all contact with Austin and the work guy, change jobs to avoid any temptation, and basically put my entire life under a microscope for Liam's inspection. I thought we were actually working through it. I did everything he asked, went to individual therapy to figure out why I'd acted out, attended couples sessions where I relived my mistakes week after week, answered every paranoid question about my whereabouts and activities. I really believed we were rebuilding something stronger together. We started trying for kids according to our original timeline, and I got pregnant within a few months. Liam seemed genuinely excited about becoming a father, or at least he was good at pretending. I thought having a baby together would finally close the door on the past and give us something positive to focus on as a family. What I didn't know was that my husband had turned into some kind of forensic accountant with my personal information. While I'm dealing with morning sickness and all the exhaustion of pregnancy, Liam is going through my medical records like he's preparing for trial. He found a receipt for Plan B from around the time I conceived and just kept it. For months. Picture this. I'm carrying his child, going to prenatal appointments together, picking out baby furniture, talking about names, and the whole time he's sitting on this piece of paper planning my destruction. He waited until I was 2 weeks postpartum to confront me with it. I'm exhausted, hormonal, trying to figure out breastfeeding, and Liam walks into our bedroom holding this receipt asking why I took emergency contraception if we were actively trying to get pregnant. How do you even respond to that when your brain is mush from sleep deprivation? The timeline was confusing. I'd taken the Plan B after sleeping with the work guy, then a few days later, during my actual fertile window, Liam and I had sex. That's when I got pregnant. But try explaining that to someone who's already decided you're lying about everything. He demanded a paternity test, which felt like the ultimate insult. I knew the baby was his. The math made perfect sense once I thought it through. But Liam wouldn't listen to logic. When the test results confirmed what I already knew, instead of apologizing for doubting me, he just became more cold and distant. That's when he announced we were going to attempt reconciliation for the child's sake. Not because he loved me or wanted to repair our marriage, but because he thought it was the responsible thing to do. Like I was some charity case he was graciously helping, instead of his wife and the mother of his baby. The next 12 years were pure psychological warfare disguised as a normal marriage. Liam never let his guard down or actually moved past what happened in year 4. Every argument somehow circled back to my affairs. Every time I wanted to go somewhere or spend time with friends, I got interrogated, like I was on parole. He'd make these comments about how I should be grateful. He stayed when other men would have left immediately. How lucky I was that he was willing to work through my betrayal, instead of abandoning me like I deserved. He turned my past mistakes into permanent weapons he could use whenever he wanted to win a fight or make me feel worthless. Meanwhile, he acted like staying married to me was this enormous sacrifice he was making for our son's benefit. Every Father's Day card, every anniversary dinner, every family vacation felt like I should be thanking him for his generosity instead of just living my life as his wife. The weird thing is, our sex life was amazing during this period, probably the best it had ever been. I think part of me was always trying to prove something to him physically, and maybe he got off on having that kind of power over me. But emotionally, we were basically strangers, sharing a house and a child. I kept thinking things would improve as more time passed, that eventually Liam would actually forgive me, and we could move forward. But he never let his resentment go. He just got better at disguising it behind therapy language and fake forgiveness. Every year that went by, I felt more trapped in my own marriage, constantly walking on eggshells and trying to earn back trust that he had no intention of ever really giving me. When I started bringing up having another baby, Liam's reaction was like I'd suggested we commit a crime together. He'd get this disgusted expression and say things like, "Why would we bring another child into this situation?" Like our family was some kind of disaster zone, instead of something we'd supposedly been rebuilding for over a decade. I wanted our son to have a sibling, wanted us to have a fresh start with a new baby that represented our renewed commitment to each other. But Liam was completely stuck in the past, unable or unwilling to see any future beyond the one where I was permanently marked as the woman who cheated on him. He'd talk about retirement plans and our long-term goals, but it became clear he didn't actually envision a real future with me. Every conversation about expanding our family or making major life changes turned into him reminding me why I didn't deserve the things I was asking for. That's when I realized that no matter what I did, no matter how many years passed, I was always going to be defined by those mistakes I made when I was 26 years old. That was my permanent identity in Liam's mind, and nothing was going to change it. The beginning of the end came when I suggested we think about relocating for better opportunities. Maybe move somewhere with lower cost of living, where we could get a bigger house and really start fresh as a family. Liam just stared at me like I'd completely lost touch with reality. Why would I want to build a future with someone I can't trust? He said, and that's when everything clicked into place. He told me he'd been seeing his therapist individually, not to work on our marriage, but to process his trauma from my infidelity and figure out his next steps. Apparently, I'd given him PTSD and attachment issues that required professional help to overcome. He'd turned my mistakes into his personal healing journey and positioned himself as the long-suffering victim of my choices. That's when he delivered the news that shattered everything. He was done. He didn't want another baby. He didn't want to move anywhere together. And he was finished pretending our marriage could work. He said he'd wasted 12 years trying to make it work, but had finally accepted that reconciliation was pointless and he deserved better. He told me he could never look at me as his partner again, that I'd destroyed him at his peak. And now he wanted me to experience the same devastation. The cruelty in his voice was unlike anything I'd ever heard from him. He said I'd taught him that there were no real teammates in life, so now I could learn that lesson myself. He'd already contacted a divorce attorney. No discussion, no final attempt at counseling, no opportunity for me to fight for our marriage. Just a unilateral decision that our 16 years together were over because he was tired of punishing me and ready to move on to his real life. He called me a monster and said he couldn't wait to be free from me. After 12 years of accepting his constant reminders of my failures, 12 years of trying to prove myself worthy of forgiveness, this was how it ended. With him finally revealing that he'd never intended to actually work things out. He'd just been biding his time until he was ready to leave. When Liam decided to divorce me, he moved with military precision. Within a week, I was served with papers and he'd moved out, taking our son with him. Not only that, but he'd gotten temporary custody by painting me as emotionally unstable, with a pattern of deceptive behavior that made me unfit for parenting. His attorney was this ruthless woman who clearly specialized in annihilating wives in family court. She portrayed me as a serial cheater who'd manipulated Liam into staying married through emotional blackmail and threats. They made it sound like I'd trapped him in a toxic relationship when he was too noble and committed to leave. The whole proceeding was character assassination. Liam played the perfect wounded husband, bringing up every argument we'd ever had. And every time I'd been out with friends, every moment of tension from our entire 16-year marriage. He made it sound like I'd been having affairs continuously, when it was literally just those two situations in year 4 that I'd spent over a decade paying for. But the most painful part was watching him with our son during this process. Suddenly, Liam was Father of the Year, coaching every sport, attending every school event, helping with homework every night. He was performing this devoted single dad role for everyone to see, doing all the things he should have been doing as a married father but somehow never quite managed. It was like he'd been saving up all his parental energy for this moment when he could showcase what an amazing father he was without me dragging him down. The judge was completely convinced. Here's this clean-cut guy who'd overcome addiction, dedicated himself to therapy and personal growth. And here's me with my ancient history of infidelity. Didn't matter that those affairs happened 12 years earlier. Didn't matter that I'd been completely faithful ever since. All that mattered was the narrative Liam and his lawyer created. I was the toxic element in our family, and everyone would be better off with me minimized and contained. I tried to defend myself, tried to explain that my mistakes were ancient history, and that I'd spent over a decade proving my commitment to our family. But every time I spoke up, they twisted it into me being manipulative and refusing to accept responsibility for destroying our marriage. How do you argue against someone who spent 12 years documenting every flaw, every mistake, every human moment you've had? How do you defend against a man who's turned forgiveness into a 12-year setup for the perfect revenge? The system was designed to punish me for crimes I'd already served time for, and Liam knew exactly how to work it. 18 months later, our divorce was finalized. Liam got primary custody of our son, and I was ordered to pay him spousal support since I'd been the higher earner throughout most of our marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. When we were married, my career success benefited both of us, but in divorce court, it became my personal burden to carry. Liam bought himself a gorgeous house in the best part of town and enrolled our son in an elite private school that I'm expected to help fund through child support. He's living his absolute dream life now, exactly like he planned during those 12 years of fake reconciliation. Meanwhile, I'm squeezed into a small apartment across town, working overtime constantly to cover my legal fees and support payments. But what really gets to me is how everyone treats this whole situation. All our mutual friends immediately took Liam's side, celebrating how brave he was for finally leaving such an unhealthy relationship. They act like he's some kind of hero for standing up for himself, conveniently forgetting that he chose to stay married to me for 12 years after my affairs. If I was really such a terrible person, why did he waste over a decade of his life with me? Why did he have a child with me? Why did he pretend to work on our marriage if he never had any intention of actually forgiving me? The truth is, Liam wanted the best of both worlds. He wanted the stability and benefits of marriage and family, but he also wanted to hold my mistakes over my head forever. When I started asking for more, another child, a real fresh start, an actual future together instead of permanent penance, he decided it was time to cash in on 12 years of accumulated resentment. This wasn't forgiveness followed by a breakdown. This was calculated, long-term revenge disguised as reconciliation. He never intended to move past what happened in year 4. He just waited until he was ready to destroy me in the most thorough way possible. Now, he gets to play the perfect divorced dad, while I'm the cautionary tale about what happens to cheating wives. He gets sympathy and support from everyone while I'm treated like I should be grateful he didn't leave me sooner. Our son barely speaks to me during our limited visits because Liam's done such a masterful job positioning himself as the victim and me as the villain. Even my own child looks at me like I'm the reason his family fell apart. Never mind that his father spent 12 years orchestrating this exact outcome. The worst part is, I know what people think when they hear my story. They think I got what I deserved. That cheaters always face consequences eventually, that Liam was justified in everything he did. But they don't understand what it's like to spend 12 years trying to atone for mistakes you made when you were young and stupid, only to discover it was all for nothing. They don't know what it's like to find out that the man you thought had forgiven you was actually just collecting evidence and biding his time. Liam didn't leave me because of what I did in year 4. He left me because he'd gotten everything he could out of punishing me for it, and he was ready to start his real life without the burden of having to pretend he'd moved on. 12 years of my life wasted on a man who was never going to forgive me, no matter what I did. 12 years of accepting responsibility, walking on eggshells, and trying to prove I was worthy of love, only to find out it was all just an elaborate setup for the perfect takedown. Liam got his freedom, but it came at the cost of revealing who he really is. Not the evolved, forgiving man he pretended to be, but a master manipulator who turned marriage into a long-term punishment system. And I was too trusting to see it until it was way too late.